Hi, fans of high quality entertainment. So last night I was thinking, well, listening to one of these bands that I'm going to be talking about. Well, hi, fans of high quality entertainment. So last night I was thinking, listening to the Beatles and, the breakup and everything. It really kind of was depressing for us Beatles fans. But looking back on their career, I think they're the only band, at least for me, that had what I would call a perfect career, and they ended it with one of their greatest albums, Abbey Road, right? And so when I think of bands that kind of, either some members left and you liked a certain lineup of the band, or a member passed away, or whatever, or even the band broke up, I wanted to make a list of 12 bands that I wish had, stayed together and made at least two or three more albums. So this is the list. They're not ranked or anything, but there's 12 different bands. And like I said, I haven't included the Beatles because they did it all, and they made so much great music that I'm happy enough that they ended up not getting back together. Sadly, of course, there's a main reason why. After 1980, they never got back together. But I don't know if, it wouldn't have been the same, I don't think, as the 60s anyway. And some fans would have, ended up being disappointed. But you never know, right? It was the Beatles. So here we go. First up, Rush. Yes. Even though I don't have any of their albums, I am thinking of getting 2112, by the way, because I listened to that recently on Spotify and I loved it more than ever. But, sadly, Neil Peart passed away, right? But otherwise, if they were still healthy today, I think they would probably still be making albums for their fans. So it's kind of sad, right? The way their career ended. So I wish Rush had still made a few more records for their fans. Next up, Genesis. Now I'm just focusing on the Genesis years with Peter Gabriel. The Phil Collins years were overall, they were great. Phil Collins did an amazing job being the lead singer. But I just, if I had to choose Phil Collins or Peter Gabriel, I love Genesis with Peter Gabriel more. And it would have been cool if they had continued on, and created at least two or three more studio albums with that lineup, with Steve Hackett also. Just what a great band. Next up, remember, these aren't ranked. It's the Doors. Yeah, sadly, of course, Jim Morrison passed away, and that was kind of the end of the Doors. I know that they still did two more albums without him, but of course it wasn't the same. Even though Other Voices, I think that's a very good album. But of course it could have been a great album with Jim Morrison on the vocals. And yeah, just imagine if they'd gone into the, at least half of the 70s and done at least two or three more albums. But it was never meant to be. And all of their albums, at least for me, are pretty consistent. They're all very good or excellent. Next up, it's The Clash. Yeah, I wish they'd stayed together past Combat Rock. I know their drummer had issues with heroin at the time, and yeah, it's just, Of course, they did make the one album mainly with Joe Strummer, Cut the Crap, which was kind of crappy. But I think they could have delivered a few, if they were all healthy and just stayed together, they could have created a lot more great music. Just a great band. How about 10cc? So, yeah, after their album How Dare You, which is my favorite 10cc album, uh, Lowell Cream, who's the second from the right, and Kevin Godley, who's beside him in the middle, they left and they did their own solo thing. And then 10cc continued on for a few more albums with Eric Stewart and Graham Goldman on each side, the far left, far right. And they still put out some very good albums. But it would have been nice if all four had stayed together after How Dare You and made, like I said, at least two or three more great studio albums. But it was not meant to be. Next up, The Velvet Underground. Of course, I'm a big fan of Lou Reed's solo career. I didn't really follow John Cale's solo career, but what I've heard of it, I did like. But they only made four great, well, three of them made four great albums. Of course, John Cale left after this second album, but it would have been nice if all four of them had stayed together into the early 70s and made more albums. But I guess us fans are just greedy for more great music. Next up. Yep, Led Zeppelin. Sadly, of course, John Bonham passed away in 1980, and they did the right thing by breaking up. They didn't hire some other drummer because nobody could replace John Bonham in Led Zeppelin. And yeah, it's just sad. I think their two final albums, Presence and In Through the Outdoor, I know they're not as loved as the earlier albums by most Led Zeppelin fans, but I think they're great albums. And they were growing, they were changing. Every album was different, and it would have been cool to see what they did into the 80s. But, Robert Plant had a pretty successful solo career. Jimmy Page, he didn't do quite as much after Led Zeppelin broke up. I know he had the band The Firm. But it would have been nice if they had, if John Bonham hadn't died and they made a few more albums. Next up. Creedence Clearwater Revival. It all fell apart. I guess it started to fall apart when Tom Fogerty, John's brother on the far left the band because, I could understand he wasn't very happy, he wasn't getting enough. It wasn't getting his songs on the albums, but when you got John Fogerty writing songs, it's hard to top that. And then, of course, Doug Clifford and Stu Cook, supposedly they wanted their songs on albums, as we all know, and they ended up being on the final CCR album, Mardi Gras, unfortunately. But, it's too bad, after Cosmo's Factory, maybe they took a bit of a break and they just stayed together and made more albums with the four original members. Yep, Grand Funk Railroad, and nothing against Craig Frost, the keyboardist they later brought in, but I think just the three of them, Mark, Don, and Mel, it's too bad that, Grand Funk kind of went on. Of course, they're still, I think, touring today with Mel and Don, but you need Mark Farner in Grand Funk Railroad in order to really call it Grand Funk Railroad. And I think they could have put out more great albums if they'd stay together. Yep. Nirvana. I on my Patreon, I actually listened to their unplugged, the MTV unplugged, the whole video. But I was doing a reaction for the album, but watching the concert, and I hadn't seen it in years, and it's because it's kind of depressing what happened, right? But they were a great band, and it's just too bad what happened. It would have been nice to have more great albums by Nirvana. Next up, the Guess Who. Yes, with Randy Bachman. Not that Randy Bachman, I think he did okay after leaving the Guess Who with Bachman Turner Overdrive, of course. And the Guess Who still had a few more successful years. But it would have been cool if they'd stayed together after they recorded American Woman. But of course, Randy Bachman left for health reasons and then, I guess, other more personal reasons regarding the band. But that was such a, and the later band was great too. But it would have been cool to see what they could have done with Randy Bachman after American Woman. We're almost done. One more. The Jimi Hendrix Experience. Once again, because Jimmy died, that was the end. I think people kind of think of Jimi Hendrix as, what could have Jimi Hendrix done if he'd lived, right? But I kind of think of it as, what could the Jimi Hendrix Experience have done? The three of them together as a band, because they were all amazing musicians. And, Mitch Mitchell on the drums with his amazing skills. So once again, it's kind of sad, but that's part of life, I guess, right? And that is it. I would love your thoughts on what other bands you wish, either with your favorite lineup of the band, even if they're going today, but which bands you wish had made more albums together. But, yeah. That's it. I'm looking forward to your comments below. Please remember to like the video and make sure you're subscribed. Thanks for watching. And I think tomorrow I'll finally be doing my review of Ween, the pod. I'm ranking and reviewing all of their albums. Bye.